Global financial markets are experiencing unprecedented turmoil as investors grapple with the fallout from President Trump's sweeping tariff policies. We're tracking what's becoming one of the most significant market downturns in recent memory. In Asia, we've witnessed a loss of nearly $150 billion from the Australian Securities Exchange in just 1 hour. The Hong Kong Hang Seng Index has plummeted approximately 10%, sending shockwaves through Asian markets. The American S&P 500 has dropped almost 14% in value. European markets aren't faring better, with the European Stock 600 declining by nearly 13%. The Shanghai Stock Exchange Composite has fallen by roughly 8%, demonstrating the global nature of this crisis. President Trump's aggressive new tariff strategy includes a 10% tariff on all incoming goods to the United States. Additional penalties are being levied against countries deemed to be unfair trade partners, nations with which the U.S. maintains a significant trade deficit. China has already retaliated with matching tariffs, showing their unwillingness to back down from what could become a prolonged trade war. The European Union's response has been measured, with officials maintaining silence while calculating their next move. The key question is how Europe will respond to these trade measures. Their decision could either help stabilize global markets or trigger a more severe economic downturn. Market analysts are concerned about these tariffs leading to a global recession. President Trump has acknowledged the market downturn but remains steadfast, stating, "I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something." This analogy might prove cold comfort to investors watching their portfolios shrink. The global financial landscape is undergoing a significant transformation, and the repercussions of these trade policies could reshape international commerce for years to come. Here's a 1875-character news piece based on your input. Good evening, viewers. Tonight we're diving into the global trade war that's reshaping international commerce as we know it. The numbers we're seeing are staggering, and some might say, questionable. Let's break this down. First, there's been quite a bit of confusion about tariff rates. Take Vietnam, for instance. While U.S. officials claim they're hitting American goods with a 90% tariff, the real number is dramatically lower, just 9.4%. That's quite a difference in arithmetic, wouldn't you say? But here's where it gets interesting. The response to these trade tensions has created two distinct camps. In one corner, we have China, the heavyweight contender. When the U.S. threw down the gauntlet, Beijing didn't hesitate. Within days, they slapped back with 34% reciprocal tariffs on American goods. And folks, we're not talking about small change here. This is a $583 billion relationship. That's billion with a B. To put that in perspective, American exports to China total $143 billion, while Chinese imports to the U.S. reach a whopping $438 billion. In the other corner, we have Vietnam taking a completely different approach. Instead of throwing punches, they're extending an olive branch. They've announced plans to remove all trade barriers with the U.S. Their reasoning? They argue that these tariffs are essentially America shooting itself in the foot. And they might have a point. You see, Vietnam isn't just another name on the map. It's become the manufacturing backbone for some of America's favorite brands. Ever wear Nike shoes? Well, over half of their footwear comes from Vietnamese factories. They're also crucial for brands like Adidas and Lululemon. So when we talk about trade wars, we're really talking about the shoes on your feet and the clothes in your closet. But now, attention is turning to what might be President Trump's favorite sparring partner, the European Union. And that's where this story gets even more interesting. Here's a compelling breakdown of the EU-US trade tensions that's making waves across the financial world. Let me tell you what's really happening with these tariffs, and it's quite the situation. The European Union, according to recent data, has been implementing what some are calling a triple-threat tariff system against American goods. Let's break down these numbers because they're stunning. We're looking at 3 major tariff categories: a 25% hit on aluminum and steel, another 25% on vehicles, and a sweeping 20% on practically everything else. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In 2024, the EU's trade relationship with America shows some eye-opening figures. They're shipping about 530 billion euros worth of goods to U.S. shores, while taking in just 333 billion in return. That's a massive 198 billion euro surplus in their favor. Germany's particularly nervous about all this, and they've got good reason. Their auto industry is right in the crosshairs, with vehicles making up nearly 10% of all EU exports to America. That 25% car tariff? It's not just numbers on paper. It's a direct hit to Germany's industrial heartland. Now the EU's response has been interesting. Commission President von der Leyen has extended an olive branch, proposing free trade discussions. But here's the kicker. They're not just waiting around for a response. Brussels is already moving to reinstate tariffs worth up to 26 billion euros on quintessentially American products. We're talking bourbon whiskey, blue jeans, and those iconic Harley-Davidson motorcycles. The real question everyone's asking is, will Trump engage in these trade talks? Because if he doesn't, what we're seeing now might just be the opening moves in a much bigger economic chess game. The EU's clearly showing they're ready to play hardball, but they're also keeping that diplomatic door wide open. This situation's developing by the day, and it's going to affect everything from Main Street to Wall Street. Here's a 1875-character news report based on the EU trade situation. Good evening, I'm your host bringing you critical updates on the European Union's developing response to the ongoing trade tensions. Tonight, we're diving deep into what many are calling a pivotal moment in international commerce. The European Union finds itself at a crossroads, wrestling with how to respond to American trade pressures. Our sources in Brussels reveal three distinct paths forward, each with its own set of consequences for both sides of the Atlantic. Let's break this down plainly. The European Commission, which holds the real power here, not individual member states, is evaluating three strategic options. First, they could choose restraint, essentially doing nothing. This approach would involve continuing negotiations for tariff reductions while using monetary policy tools to stabilize their economy. It's the path of least resistance. But here's the catch. Many analysts believe it could encourage more aggressive trade actions from Washington. The second option, which seems to be gaining traction, involves implementing targeted tariffs. Think of it as strategic pressure points, similar to their response to the steel and aluminum tariffs. The EU would specifically target products from states and industries closely aligned with the current administration. For example, they're looking at soybean imports from Louisiana, hitting where it hurts politically. What's particularly fascinating here is how the European Commission maintains control. Despite differing opinions among member states, there's no veto power on trade policy. This centralized authority actually streamlines their decision-making process, even while internal debates continue. The key factor here is timing. Markets are already reacting to these possibilities, and our financial analysts suggest that each day of uncertainty adds pressure to both economies. The EU's challenge is balancing the need for a strong response against the potential economic fallout from an escalating trade war. For viewers looking to understand how this might affect their portfolios, we'll be bringing you detailed analysis in our next segment. In a significant development shaping global trade dynamics, the European Union faces a critical decision point in its response to U.S. trade pressures. Our analysis focuses on the strategic choices ahead for Brussels and their implications for international commerce. The EU's previous attempt at limited retaliation, targeting bourbon whiskey from Louisiana, home state of House Speaker Mike Johnson, proved ineffective. Trump countered with threats of imposing a 200% duty on European spirits, backing the EU into a corner. Trade experts identify three distinct paths forward. The first option, continuing with limited retaliation, carries risks of signaling weakness. The second path involves maintaining current positions, while the third would escalate into a full-scale trade war. Should the EU choose the nuclear option of full-blown trade war, it would implement broad retaliation across most U.S. imports. Sources close to EU leadership suggest this could manifest as a matching 20% flat tariff on American goods. While causing short-term economic pain, it would send an unambiguous message about European resolve. The EU's hidden ace is services trade. While Europe maintains a €157 billion surplus in goods with the US, it runs a €109 billion deficit in services, especially in digital services where American companies dominate. This provides Brussels with significant leverage in negotiations. The European Commission has been positioning itself for potential action in this sector. France has been particularly vocal about digital service regulations, suggesting that any comprehensive trade response could target this vulnerable area of the U.S. economy. Trade analysts suggest this services angle could prove crucial in bringing Washington back to the negotiating table, as it represents a pressure point that previous trade disputes haven't fully explored. Here's a 1875-character news piece based on your input. In a significant escalation of trade tensions, the European Union is preparing what analysts call a digital nuclear option against American tech giants. This development marks a new chapter in the ongoing economic chess game between global powers. Our sources in Brussels reveal that the EU's anti-coercion instrument could become the centerpiece of Europe's response to US trade pressures. This isn't your grandfather's trade war. We're looking at something far more sophisticated than traditional tariffs. Let me break this down for you folks. The EU is eyeing a multi-pronged approach that could hit American tech companies where it hurts most. We're talking about potentially denying business licenses, blocking access to lucrative public contracts, and even restricting intellectual property rights. But that's just the beginning. The real game changers here are two pieces of legislation: the Digital Markets Act, DMA, and the Digital Services Act, DSA. These regulations aren't just paper tigers. They're designed to fundamentally reshape how tech giants operate in Europe. Think about it this way. The DMA would force companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, and Meta to open their platforms to competitors. No more playing favorites with their own services. Meanwhile, the DSA would hold these platforms accountable for content and data handling in ways we've never seen before. What's particularly interesting here is how Europe is moving beyond traditional trade warfare tactics. Instead of just slapping tariffs on American goods, they're creating a sophisticated regulatory framework that could reshape the digital economy. Our analysis suggests the EU is likely to pursue a middle ground approach, combining targeted tariffs on sectors like automotive with these new regulatory pressures on digital services. It's a calculated strategy that leverages Europe's considerable market power while minimizing potential economic blowback. This story continues to develop, but one thing's clear. The rules of international trade are being rewritten before our eyes, and technology is at the center of it all. Breaking news on the escalating trade tensions between the United States and European Union, where a complex game of economic chess is unfolding. Our analyst brings you the latest developments. The European Union faces a critical decision point in its response to US trade pressures, particularly regarding tech giants creating market disruptions. Sources close to EU leadership indicate they're crafting a strategic response that could include graduated measures. While France advocates for immediate anti-coercion measures, majority opinion among EU officials favors maintaining negotiations. However, they're keeping all options open, understanding the delicate balance required. The situation has evolved into a test of political endurance. Two crucial questions emerge. Can EU member states maintain unity rather than pursuing individual agreements with Washington? And how long can the US administration resist domestic pressure? Recent developments show economic strain in the US, with demonstrations occurring across major cities this weekend. Market analysts suggest these protests, combined with declining approval ratings, might force the US administration to reconsider. The EU's strategy focuses on presenting a unified front while avoiding escalation. Sources within Brussels emphasize coordinated action rather than individual member states pursuing separate arrangements. Key to this approach is the EU's potential escalation roadmap, including various measures if diplomatic channels fail. These range from targeted regulatory actions to broader economic responses, particularly in services where the EU maintains leverage. The situation remains fluid, with both sides carefully measuring responses. Experts suggest diversification of trade partnerships and strengthening internal market resilience remain crucial. Stay tuned for updates as this situation continues to evolve. Good evening. I'm your host bringing you today's analysis of global trade developments. Let's discuss the European Union's strategic options for strengthening its position internationally. Three significant paths have emerged for the EU's trade future. The first involves deepening ties with Mercosur, representing a powerful South American trade bloc. The second focuses on expanding relations with India, tapping into one of the world's fastest-growing economies. The third option centers on strengthening partnerships with Canada, building on the CETA agreement. These strategies could reshape global trade dynamics. By diversifying partnerships, the EU could insulate itself from economic shocks and reduce dependency on traditional trading partners. There's also discussion about a proposed four-tiered European Union structure. This approach could accommodate new members, including countries from Northern Africa, and create closer ties with Canada. It's a vision that could transform European integration and international cooperation. The EU's role in preventing trade conflicts is crucial. By establishing stronger multilateral relationships, the bloc could create a more stable trading environment. The proposed multi-tiered system could offer flexibility while maintaining EU's core values. We're seeing significant support for these ideas from our audience, and I'd like to thank our Patreon supporters, Jan Shia, Christian Peter, HVD, BGite Europe, Stefan, and Mr. Robot. For those interested in our weekly policy discussions, join our Patreon community to vote on future topics and access exclusive content about European integration and trade developments. What's your take on these EU strategies? Share your thoughts below. Which option would best serve European interests today?